So cabinetry is my number three. And we've had flooring, we've had wall coverings. Cabinetry is my number three releaser of toxins into a home. And you would think it wouldn't even be on the list because it's just such a small area, right? I mean, compared to your walls and compared to your floors, cabinetry makes up a very, very small area of your house. But the thing is that cabinetry is typically made from things like plywoods or particle boards, held together with glues and then finished stains and clear coats and paints. And every single day you wake up in the morning and you grab that cup of coffee or cup for coffee or tea when you open up the door, and you get this rush of chemical into the face. And that's the off-gassing from the cabinetry that gets stuck in there until the next time you open the door. So I think that cabinetry is really one of those crucial parts of a home that you have to look at in order to make it a healthier space. I talked about before how cabinets are made. Typically, the boxes are made of a plywood or a medium density fiberboard, particle board that's laminated. And you have to make sure that the materials that are used are either formaldehyde free or are the least amount of formaldehyde available. Something like Green Guard Gold certified, or beyond just what's called CARB compliance, the California Air Resource Board. You want to make sure that these are really low emitting cabinets. The doors and the drawer fronts are typically solid wood. Then you have glue that holds it all together in small spaces. Now, I have actually tested cabinetry myself, and I've tested glues. And I found that wood glue, any wood glue that they'll use, will contain a high amount of formaldehyde that will off-gas for 2.5 to 4.5 years. The thing is, though, about cabinetry is when they put the pieces of wood together and they glue that small area, once they squeeze the pieces together and they scrape off and sand off all that excess glue, there's such a small area that's actually exposed. We're talking about, thinner than a human hair, that we really don't find any measurable off-gassing from that adhesive. So I really don't worry about that when I'm dealing with clients who have extreme sensitivities, because it's such a small amount. You'd actually find more formaldehyde outside naturally than you find from that wood glue. Then you have hardware, your hinges, your knobs and pulls, and your drawer slides and all that. It's all made of predominantly metal and then very hard nylons that do not off-gas. So I don't worry about that. But then you're finished. And the finish is either a stain and a clear coat or a painted finish, which is very popular now. For the most part, painted finishes will always off-gas less than stains and clear coats. Stain, oil-based stain, which is used predominantly throughout the industry, is one of the biggest releasers of formaldehyde off-gassing in all of woodwork. So when you put a clear coat over the top, it helps to block some of that off-gassing, but it still shines through. And that off-gassing will last anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 years after reaching a full cure. And so manufacturers are starting to use water-based instead of oil-based. So it limits the amount of solvent. And they're starting to use very, very low VOC water-based clear coats, which is really helping, but doesn't completely block all that chemical off-gassing. So with those customers who are extremely sensitive, we're having cabinets made by a company like Crystal Cabinets. They're making them unfinished. We're finishing them in the field using Safe Coat products because we know the Safe Coat products will block any potential off-gassing there could be from those small areas like the wood glue. Now, with cabinetry, there's a couple of certifications I look for. Their first one is the KCMA certification. The KCMA is their environmental stewardship program. Honestly, folks, this doesn't pertain much to the health of the occupant. It's more towards the overall goal of the cabinet maker in their environmental stewardship. Are they using certified sustainably harvested woods? Do they have a very strong dust collection system, a recycling program within the company? What are they doing to minimize waste? What do they do to minimize pollution? So these are all very good attributes that I look for in a company, just to know that they're a good corporate citizen, that I'd like to work with them. That's the first thing I look for. You can also start to look for what's called Green Guard Gold certification. Used to be called, I think, Green Guard Children in Schools, but now it's called Green Guard Gold. Green Guard Gold certification actually will tell you that they've tested this piece. It's actually found now in furniture. We're seeing more in furniture. Hasn't quite hit the cabinetry market yet, but it will. The Green Guard Gold certification will be testing the finished good and making sure that it has less than 7 parts per billion of formaldehyde off-gassing coming from it. That's an extremely low number. That's definitely something that I look for. I would certainly recommend that to any of my clients because that's almost as low as you can get with a wood, because wood contains some naturally found formaldehyde because it was a once living thing. All right, the fourth and final area inside the home to think about is your personal furnishings, furniture, window treatments, area rugs. And then I want to talk about, I've mentioned before that I test things, and I'm talking to you about the FRAT system that I use. So with furniture, obviously, it's the same thing we talked about with cabinetry. A lot of the same materials used. You want to look for materials that are Green Guard Gold certified. Companies like even West Elm and Pottery Barn and others are starting to showcase Green Guard Gold certified pieces. Window treatments. You have to remember that light coming through a window is going to carry with it a lot of heat energy, and that will excite the chemicals that are in your window treatments and then expels into the air. We work with a company called Earthshade that makes some absolutely fabulous low chemical, low tox window treatments. Area rugs. So let me tell you a story. And you already know where it goes just by me saying area rugs. But so several years ago, I was called up to Minnesota to work with a family who had moved into a home. And about 6 months after moving in the home, they decided to install brand new engineered hardwood flooring throughout the entire space. This is about 5,000 square feet of hardwood throughout their house, upper level, main level, and lower level. Beautiful hardwood flooring. But within about a week for getting this wood installed, the entire family started complaining about flu-like symptoms, to the point where the mom and one of the daughters actually moved out and stayed in a hotel because they couldn't tolerate being in the space. They called in several indoor air quality scientists, and they all concluded, because they all came in with their handheld meters, they even did air quality tests, sampling tests, said, yep, there's a formaldehyde problem in this house, and it's got to be coming from those hardwood floors. That's the only thing that was done. You got 5,000 square feet of engineered hardwood, and the whole family's getting sick. Well, they were facing about a $55,000-$60,000 investment to rip out these floors and install new floors. And so they wanted to make one more attempt to make sure that this is what the problem was. And I'm not exactly sure how I was called in. I think it was one of the indoor air quality scientists said, that's about the extent that he knows. Why don't you call Andy? And so I went up there and I used this FRAT system that I have a picture of here. And I tested every room of the house, the floor in every room, just to make sure that maybe it was just the bedrooms, or maybe it was just a bad batch in a couple of cartons that was causing the problem, but I tested every room. And after doing my formaldehyde release test, I found that those hardwood floors were completely healthy, didn't emit formaldehyde at all. And everyone in the home was just completely dumbfounded because, what they've been told by 3 other experts, I just, dismissed pretty quickly. So then I started thinking, well, maybe they repainted. So I started testing painted walls. I started testing some furniture, and it dawned on me that every room in the house also had a brand new area rug, whether it was a small, 2x3 area rug behind next to the bed, or it was a large area rug in the great room or the living room. Every single room had an area rug. They had something like 15 or 17 new area rugs in this house. So I started testing those, and that's what the culprit was. Rugs were testing over 500 parts per billion of formaldehyde. It's probably coming from the dyes or the pesticides that were used. They were beautiful area rugs, very well made, but they were highly, highly toxic. And so found out what the culprit was. I told them, roll them all up, put them up in the garage, and let me know tomorrow how you're feeling. So I drive my 6.5 hours home, wake up the next morning, get my email, and there's an email saying that, can't believe it, but everybody's feeling better already. Headaches are going away, itchy eyes, watery eyes are going away. And then I talked to them on the phone a few days later, and they said, we can't sense a thing anymore. That was exactly the problem. And so with my tests, I probably, it was probably a $500 or $600 test at the time, saved them about $60,000 worth of ripping out those hardwood floors just because of these down area rugs. So I use this every day with clients, making sure be careful on where you get those area rugs. So let me talk about this FRAT system a bit here because I want to get in Q&A. The FRAT system is a formaldehyde release system or testing system. And you've got the picture there. Here's a little unit right here. And what I can do is take a sample that somebody sends me, or even go into somebody's home with this little disc, these little discs that I would activate with distilled water and attach to a surface. And I attach it to the surface and it sits there for 30 minutes. What's called passive emissivity. It passively absorbs any formaldehyde that's coming from this surface. And in 30 minutes, I take the tab off, I put it into the spectrophotometer, and I read the difference, the color difference in the tab. And that shows me down to an accuracy of 1 part per billion, how much formaldehyde is coming from that surface. And so this test has saved clients, obviously, tens of thousands of dollars. We've averted so many crises over the years. People not installing something that they're going to install because of what we found through our testing. Oops. All right. Now, I talked about the 90% toxicity it's found from the things you see and touch on a daily basis. Where's that last 10% coming from? Well, it's coming from the things you don't see. Your wall assembly, how your wall's built, windows, attic and crawl space, and the concrete itself. And I'll quickly go through these things because, again, they're not as important from direct human health contact, but they are important because you have one shot at it. So we want to make sure you choose wisely. Your wall assembly, we want to make sure that the wall assembly in constructing a home is made with materials that will resist moisture. And we'll talk about that in a second. Resist moisture, but if moisture does get in, there are ways for it to escape so it doesn't sit there and fester and cause a mold problem. The windows, we want to make sure that the windows are itself not going to off gas. All right. In order of from good to not so good, your best window you'll find is an aluminum frame window. Then you have a fiberglass frame window, then a wood window, and then vinyl windows. Now, you'd think wood windows would be a little bit higher, but all wood used for the construction of windows in North America have to be treated with pesticides. And so in order to keep that from causing any harm with my extremely chemical sensitive clients, we would have to put on special coatings, and there's no way to fully coat a wood frame window once it's installed. And so we just tend to avoid those. Attic and crawl space. You really have to be careful with how you construct, let's say, an attic. Up here, I'm in Wisconsin, and here we build our homes with basements. And so all the HVAC equipment is going to be down in the basement. Okay. In areas of the country that build homes concrete slab on grade or have a crawl space, your HVAC systems are sometimes up in the attic. And if that's the case, imagine having all that equipment up there and air flowing through. There's a high probability that you're going to have cracks and crevices and little voids within the sheet metal of the equipment that'll draw in attic air that could also draw in mold spores, which causes that problem of mold generating within your duct system. And then concrete itself, Concrete for the most part is going to be inert. But in the last 10 years, there's been this push to use an ingredient in concrete called fly ash. Fly ash is the sludge that's scraped from the inside of the smokestacks of coal-fired energy plants. And for years, environmentalists were complaining about, what do you do with this stuff when you scrape it out of there? We don't want to put it in a landfill. And the reason they don't want to put it in a landfill is because when you burn coal, one of the byproducts is that it actually releases mercury out of the coal. And so this sludge contains mercury. So instead of putting it into a landfill, we're putting it into concrete in everybody's homes. And that mercury can actually come off of the concrete during the curing process. And concrete usually takes 30 to 60 days to reach, a 98% cure. So this is the really important time to make sure you're not going to be around this new concrete, or better yet, just ask the supplier not to put fly ash in your concrete. And they'll do it sometimes for a fee, sometimes for free. So one of the things I'll talk about this last 10%, especially with the windows, is this is where we also bring into the discussion of the feeling of bringing the outdoors into the home. The trend has been for the last 20 years now for people to have that sort of that feeling of the outdoors inside of the home through the use of more natural air, more natural light, the colors of the home to be more not necessarily green per se, but more colors of nature. And we want to evoke those feelings of being outside. So we see, again, fresh air intakes on your HVAC systems, natural light, the use of more windows, calming colors, and design and placement of how we actually design and place our homes on the property, and how we design and place furniture and spaces within the home. Several years ago, I got involved in a project that the homeowners were incorporating what's called Stapatya Veda architecture. So everybody's familiar with what yoga is, and yoga is essentially an Ayurvedic principle of movement, and it's medicinal and so forth. Stapatya Veda is an Ayurvedic principle of design and construction. And within the rules of how do you build a home according to Vedic principles, one of the rules I learned years ago just stuck with me. And that rule was that every corner of every room should bring you bliss. And I've always remembered that, because I believe that building a healthy home is not only building a home that's utilizing healthy materials, but also makes you feel good. I want you to wake up every single day and look at this house, whatever you use, and absolutely love it, because that's something that feels good. It's a healthy home attribute. All right. Now, don't forget about moisture control. I talked about a little bit about this with the wall assembly. Waterproofing of your basement. Waterproofing around penetrations on the roof. The excuse me, air barriers and sheathing. Very important in the construction of your home to make sure you don't get moisture coming into the home. I'd point more specific things out about this. So many things to talk about, and I have to really gear it towards the individual customer, individual client, that whatever's going to work the best for them. Landscaping and drainage, huge issue to deal with. So often art in a home because of what's happening outside of the home. And then your HVAC system. Folks, do not skimp on the HVAC system. I believe that every home could use a dehumidification system, especially in the first few years. First few years that a home is built, you'll have 200 to 400 gallons of water in the air just from the curing process of the paints, the concrete, the drywall mud. You got to get that moisture out. Pardon me. All right. Mold is probably the biggest thing that we're dealing with now, all around the country. The first 25 years of my career, I heard really nothing about mold. I heard everything about chemical sensitivity, chemical emissions. In the last 5 years, mold has been the driving factor. Probably 7 out of 10 people today call and want to talk about how to remediate, mitigate, or build to avoid mold. Now, mold is naturally found outside. We know this. Indoor mold is problematic. All right, so we want to avoid indoor mold proliferation and growth. And we do that by eliminating the reasons you have mold. Mold comes because of moisture, heat, and a food source. If we can eliminate 1 or 2 of those 3, you'll eliminate the possibility of mold. All right. So we want to make sure we spend an awful lot of time with every client talking about this. The biggest issue we have right now that I see is a chronic inflammation response. There has been, and I know I talked about multiple chemical sensitivity before and how you become chemically sensitive. In the last 5-6 years, we have learned an awful lot about mold, and specifically about the HLA-DR gene that some people carry. About 25% of the country, of the population of the country, carries this genetic marker, meaning that you're more susceptible to problems that occur because of mold exposure. This is also where research is going in finding that MCS, chemical sensitivity, is not really the standalone disease that we all thought it was maybe 20 years ago, but that chemical sensitivity is actually a symptom of chronic inflammation response. It's also a symptom of Lyme's disease, or a symptom of mast cell activation. So because of the fact that we're doing more research on this particular genetic marker, we're finding that, what does that lead to? And it's leading to all the same people who were deemed to be chemically sensitive before are actually found to have one of those other underlying conditions. All right, folks, that is it. I am going to stop the share here. And if you have any questions, any comments, now's the time.
Hey, Andy, thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. It was really informative and has me thinking about my whole house. So maybe you'll get a call from me soon. So so we're going to begin the Q&A as you suggested, and I just want to go over a few things for the audience. We don't take questions directly from the chat. We just ask everybody raise their hand from in Zoom. If you're not familiar with how to do that, you need to go to the bottom of the Zoom, second from the right. There's a reactions button. You'll click on that, and then you'll click raise hand. When I select on you, please state where you're from, and I'll ask you to ask your question. And then we just ask that everybody keep their questions brief and on topic. And with that, let me start off with a question here. What are the most important things in order of importance for us to focus on to create a healthy home?
Well, I honestly believe that that list that I came up with, the 90% of the toxicity comes from those 4 items. You have to remember that when you come in contact with chemicals, whether it's in the air, something that you're wearing, something that you're eating, and the detrimental effects that it has within the body, sometimes we don't know where that source is, but we can pretty much say that inside of the home, these are the areas that are causing the biggest concern. Now, with that, the most important thing to concentrate within the home is the bedroom or bedrooms. Bedrooms need to be the healthy sanctuary in the room. We're inundated with chemical exposure throughout our days, at places of work, where we go to school, wherever we go, in our cars, wherever. Bedroom has got to be the place where we hope to get 6 to 8 hours a night of restorative sleep. We can't get that restorative sleep if we're being inundated with chemical exposure, electromagnetic field exposure. We didn't even talk about that, mold exposure, and so forth. If you had a limited budget and you can only work on one room at a time, work on the bedroom first.
What about mattresses and box springs?
Yep. Mattresses, box springs, your bedding materials, anything that you come in contact with throughout the night. Definitely look for an organic, synthetic chemical-free mattress. There's some great options out there. There's a company called My Green Mattress I absolutely love. I sleep on one of their mattresses myself. There's a brand called Savvy Rest that makes all natural latex mattresses. And again, it's not just the fact that they're using latex or organic materials, but it's at every part of the process. Even the fabric covers are free of pesticides, free of flame retardants. We want to get rid of all of that so that, again, your body is not competing with that throughout the night.